Hey Girls Rock Campers, thanks so much for checking out this video. This is the Home Recording 101 workshop. Before we get into things, I just wanted to thank you so much for watching this video and for participating in camp this year. I know that it looks and feels a little bit different than it usually does, but I'm still really excited to talk about how you can make some cool stuff for yourself. So my name is Amy Upthagrove, and I am a recording, mixing, and live sound engineer based here in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. I primarily work out of Wire and Vice Studio in Wauwatosa, but I also do a ton of DIY home recording right here in my little home studio in my office. So back in the day, before access to personal computers was such a prevalent thing in our society. We carry around supercomputers in our pocket now if you have a smartphone, and anywhere you go, there's tons of computers everywhere. But before that existed, recording tended to depend heavily on analog recording gear, which can be very expensive, takes up a lot of space, takes a lot of upkeep. And because of that, musicians and labels were forced to spend a ton of money in these high-class professional recording studios around the world, like Electrical Audio in Chicago, or Electric Lady in New York, or Capitol Records in LA. Now, those recording studios are still around, and they're still making great records and doing incredible work, and they're really cool. So if you're into recording at all, totally check them out and do some research, because there's plenty of really, really fun stories about all three of those places, as well as many others around the world. But access to technology has kind of leveled out the playing field a little bit. So now, rather than having to rely on labels or having a lot of money to begin with, now you can make great sounding recordings from the comfort of your own home with just a fraction of the costs that it would have taken even 20 years ago. So today we're going to cover the basics of home recording. Alright, so let's go through some of the equipment that you're going to need to get started. Now, there's a wide array of options, and there's lots of different ways to get into this, but these are the basic, the very basic tenets that you're going to need to understand when you're looking for some entry-level recording equipment, if that's something that you're interested in. So you need an interface, microphones, a DAW, and headphones or speakers to listen back. We're going to talk about each individual category of equipment here in a little bit more detail. Alright, so an interface is a piece of hardware that serves to connect your instruments and your microphones to your computer. And what it does is it just converts a variety of analog and digital audio signals to a format that is compatible with your DAW and computer. And we're going to talk about what a DAW is in a second here. And then you're going to also need some microphones. You really only need one microphone to get started, and there's lots of different levels of quality microphones that you can get into. But basically, when you are looking for a microphone, make sure that you get a mic that suits your needs, a microphone stand to put it on, because you don't want to be actually holding the microphone, because it creates a lot of unnecessary noise that you don't want there when you're actually doing recordings, and any kinds of cabling that you need to connect your microphone to your interface. A DAW is a software program that you can use to record audio, edit, and produce songs in a multi-track environment. So some examples of this are, a lot of people are familiar with GarageBand. That's a DAW that is included on, I think, most Apple devices for free. The industry standard DAW is Pro Tools, but a ton of people really love using Ableton Live or Logic or Reason, which are other recording programs that you can use. Each one has a lot of nuance and a lot of pros and cons, and that could be a whole workshop in and of itself. But when it really comes down to it, just look at what you can afford, look at what you want to do, and see which one is best for you. And there's also a lot of really great free options that can get you into recording audio and mixing and editing without having to pay, you know, monthly or yearly fees or dropping like $700 on software. So some of these free options are Spire, which is one that I have been very interested in lately. It's actually an app for smartphones and tablets that allows you to record really high quality right onto your phone. I like to use it for recording, you know, less professional sounding demos, or if I have an idea and I don't have access to a computer, I just whip it out and start putting those ideas down. Another really great free option is Audacity, which is an open source free program that you can get online. Lastly, you're going to need either headphones or speakers or a combination of both to monitor what you're recording and to hear the other tracks as you're doing a multi-track recording. So there's lots of different great headphones to get you started. Usually you're going to want an over-the-ear headphone, like the one that I'm wearing right now. Generally, they're a little bit more noise canceling. You don't really want to use earbuds when you're mixing higher quality audio, just because they're not going to give you an accurate representation as to what your sounds sound like for monitoring. So there's lots of different kinds of great monitors that you can get into as well. I have a pair of little M Audio monitors that work really well for me. A lot of people like the MKE monitors. When it comes to trying to figure out where to start with all of this, it can be super overwhelming, and it can be kind of expensive if you're not sure where to start. So because of that, there's a ton of really incredible like starter packs for home recording. Back in 2010, I got my very first starter pack for recording when I was in high school. I just wanted to record my own music and learn how to do that, and getting that starter pack is actually what kind of changed my course and pushed me towards audio as an actual profession. And I actually still use the interface that I got in that kit today. It's a little PreSonus audio box, the little 2-channel interface. So there's lots of different starter pack options. Rode has a really good one. Focusrite is one of the most common ones, and PreSonus also has that. And usually these starter kits come with all of the basics that we just covered. So when I got my PreSonus starter pack, it came with a little 2-channel interface. It came with headphones. It came with this this microphone and a stand and a recording program. So I highly recommend if you want to start getting into that higher level of home recording, but you're not sure where to start, go to your local music store and ask them about their different home recording starter kits. All right, so now we're going to talk about a couple of different concepts before we dive into to the meat and potatoes of home recording. We're going to talk about signal flow, room acoustics, and the concept of scalability. So one of the most important concepts that you need to understand when you're getting into audio is signal flow. Signal flow is just the path that your audio takes from source to playback. So for example, right now I'm recording my audio. The source is my voice. I talk, which creates the acoustic sound waves that go into the microphone. The microphone transduces it, turns the acoustical energy into electrical energy, and passes it through this XLR cable. My XLR cable is connected to the interface, okay? And at the interface, that's where I set my levels, which is, how loud it's gonna be and how much of the signal gets sent into it. And from the interface, it gets sent to my computer. I'm using Pro Tools to record, so it gets sent into a Pro Tools session, and then that Pro Tools session sends it back to my headphones so that I can hear what's going on. To me, the most important part of signal flow is understanding why it's as important as it is. When you're recording, things aren't always going to work. You know, sometimes you're going to run into technical difficulties, and it's going to be up to you to find the source of the issue. Usually, technical difficulties can be traced back by figuring out the signal flow, you know? So if you aren't getting sound for some reason, you got to start at the source. Check the source, make sure that the microphone is working, you know? Is it plugged in? Are you getting levels on the board? Where is the sound not getting through? And usually you can discover little problems like, oh yeah, my microphone's not working because it's not plugged into the board, or my board isn't like properly configured with my computer and stuff like that. So yeah, signal flow is very important to understand because it's essential for setting good levels and troubleshooting throughout your process. And that actually applies to live sound as well as recorded sound. So the second concept we're going to talk about is room acoustics, okay? So basically, where you record your sound has a major impact on how your song is going to sound. So you can hear the difference if I'm recording, you know, with my face 3 inches away from my microphone versus if I stand far away from the microphone versus if I'm in my office where there's a carpet and there's a lot of stuff on the walls but there's high ceilings, versus like my bathroom where it's very echoey, or my bedroom which is very small and there's a lot of fabric that is absorbing a lot of the sound. When it comes to treating a room for the best possible acoustics, there's 2 different types of sound treatment in a room. There's soundproofing and acoustical treatment. Soundproofing is the elimination of unwanted sounds. In a recording studio, this is often used by foam and different elements in the construction like double-paned windows and specially reinforced door frames and stuff like that, so that sound from outside your room doesn't get into the room that you're recording, because you don't want it to interfere with the pure sound that you're trying to create into the microphones. There's a ton of really great DIY options for soundproofing as well, such as using egg cartons as a replacement for soundproof foam, or blankets, carpets, anything soft that's going to absorb a lot of sound or try to kind of muffle it. The other kind of room treatment that you can do is acoustical treatment. Arguably, it's harder to DIY than soundproofing, but the goal is to evenly spread the frequency response in the room. So frequency response, that's like your really low bass tones and the mid tones and the really high tinny high frequency tones. So there's 2 different kinds of acoustical treatment that you can do, and that's absorption and diffusion. Absorption is exactly what it sounds like. It absorbs the unwanted frequencies and reflections that can create some kind of funky, weird sounds in your recordings. And diffusion, it's generally a hard panel that tries to scatter the frequencies evenly throughout the room rather than trying to pull it out. It just diffuses it. So the last concept that we're going to talk about is scalability, okay? So scalability is your ability to build something up or simplify it depending on your needs. This isn't actually an audio concept, it's more of a technology design concept, but when it comes to figuring out how you're going to approach the equipment that you want to use for your recording, it's really important to think about how you can take the things that you have and make them a little bit more complex to get a higher quality sound, or simplify it as much as you want to or need to, depending on how you want your recordings to sound. There's such a wide variety of production techniques out there in home recording that can be very, very clear sounding and professional, and you would be surprised to find that they're recorded at home and not in a professional studio. And there can be very low fidelity recordings that sound great. A lot of recording artists take a more DIY approach to their music making, And they fall all along this spectrum of super high fidelity, clear-cut, professional sounding recordings, and more low fidelity, kind of gritty, less professional sounding recordings. So two ends of that spectrum, a couple of examples here. There is a DIY musician called Sydney Gish who records all of her own stuff at her house through Logic and Pro Tools and stuff like that. And when I found out that she did all of her own production, I was surprised because it does not sound like it's recorded in a dorm room in Boston, but it is. Whereas you take somebody like Karen O, who is the lead singer of the Yeah Yeah Yeahs. I know that you are familiar with them because of our camp song this year. But the lead singer of the Yeah Yeah Yeahs did a really incredible solo album called Crush Songs. And she did all of those recordings herself, and they're extremely lo-fi. You hear a lot of distortion and a lot of like extra sounds that you're like, whoa, this is not what I was expecting from the singer of the Yeah Yeah Yeahs, but it's really cool. So before you start recording your song, you got to decide what approach you want and build your techniques and the different equipment that you're using around that. Because you can record an incredible album only using your cell phone. And it can sound, depending on the microphones that you use, it can sound extremely professional, it can sound, intentionally lo-fi. And I personally, as a producer, love to experiment with all sides of that spectrum. So the most important thing is to decide what you want it to sound like and figure out how to get there. Alright, thank you so much for checking out this video. I hope that you learned something new. If you ever have any questions about getting started with this stuff, please feel free to shoot me an email. This is my email address. And if you do get into recording, I would love to hear what you are working on. So feel free to send me some mixes. I'd love to give feedback, anything like that. Feel free to hit me up. Thank you.